Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we're going to ask and answer a question what I actually see quite a bit. Now, you might at the start of this video think to yourself, why are you answering this? Can that many people really be asking this? And the answer is, well, actually, yeah, you'd be surprised, especially for people new to the hobby. And this is starting to feel slightly clickbaity. So, the question is, what colour should you paint your Warhammer 40,000 army? Now, I don't mean that as in a blanket statement of, I think you should paint them grey, and then that would be what everyone has to do. No, more sensible than that. See, when you first pick up Warhammer 40,000 and you decide what army you're going to go for, you basically get a real chance of option paralysis when it comes to what you want your models to look like. I mean, it's not just the colour, there's also the fact that kit bashing exists, and you might decide that you like the look of two different forces, and is there a way to work them in together? It's something that happens quite a bit. But the announcement of the Adeptus Custodes and the imminent release of their codex and their properly quality looking models has kind of prompted me to see that question being asked a bit more, mostly because I'm not going to paint them gold. Now, from what we know at the moment, you can paint them gold. There is also like some black in there as well. A few of them have got black armour. Apparently there's a few of them with white armour too. Now, whether these will be full on kind of, I don't really know how to describe it, like groups within the larger force of the Custodes that paint their armour that way, I don't know yet. We'll find out. But nowhere has it said, yeah, a nice bit of silver and a bit of dark red is exactly the way you should go. And yet, that's pretty much how I intend to paint them, because much though I like the gold look, I don't really fancy an entire army of banana boys. I want to have something a little more subtle, a little more understated, which is kind of tricky to achieve with Custodes because they are ornamental as hell. That being said, quite a lot of people have said, well, you can't do that, can you? You can't paint them that colour. You're not supposed to. They're supposed to be gold, or they're supposed to be black or white. Even like the black and white we're not entirely sure about. Why would you just paint them a different colour? Should you be able to do that? And the answer is basically yes. I mean, there are forces within Warhammer 40,000 that do have I wouldn't say a limitation, but there's more of an expectation that they be painted one way as opposed to another. For instance, the Space Wolves, if you're going for OG Space Wolves, well, they're pretty well established as having kind of sky blue armour with yellow, red, black trim, and that's pretty much what everyone paints them as. But older Space Wolves forces, they didn't really have that colour scheme. They were much more of a storm grey, and in fact, if you look at the way that Forge World paints Horus Heresy Space Wolves, the schemes are similar. But to be honest, I prefer the old style a lot better. I think they're a lot less. I think they're a bit more understated, a bit more grim almost, a bit darker than their 40k counterparts. When it comes to things like painting stuff like Ultramarines or Imperial Fist, of course, if you choose those chapters, then you will mostly choose those colours. But it's a little bit easier with some of the others. I mean, there are so many like successor chapters to the big names that you can kind of get away with painting them however you like. Yes, there are some conventions. A lot of Blood Angel successor chapters are painted red, for instance. But really, there's nothing to stop you from creating a Blood Angel successor chapter that's painted however you want to paint them. Grey Knights is another example of being kind of a bit closer towards an accepted paint job. And yet, much like Space Wolves, even though Space Wolves haven't really got successor chapters unless you count the Primaris stuff, obviously, you can kind of get away with it, things here and there that, to be honest, it's fine. It really is fine. I mean, I've seen Grey Knights that have been painted with much more of a heavy slant towards like red and white, for instance. You can get a nice regal look out of Grey Knights with a lot of red and white. And yeah, that means they're not grey anymore. That means they don't match the official artwork. But it doesn't really matter. I think the key is execution and making sure that everything fits. Yeah, if you turn up with bright pink Grey Knights with yellow splashes all over the armour, that might look a little bit off. That might look a little bit Slanesh, in fact, to be honest. But at the end of the day, you've got to do whatever makes you happy. You've got to make a force that you're satisfied with. And there are people in the hobby who will look at an army that is not painted strictly how it should be, in the case of things like Space Wolves and Grey Knights, and probably even Custodes when they're released, and they will sort of go, it's not supposed to be that colour. Well, in a way, that's true. It's probably not supposed to be that colour. But fortunately, Games Workshop have kind of given us the chance to kind of explore things however you want to explore them. There's so much in the way of not forgotten history, but things that are left deliberately vague that can explain, for instance, the fact that there is an army out there that has a very Iron Warriors-esque paint scheme. I mean, the Silver Skulls as a chapter is of course loyalist. They are supposed to be a Ultramarine successor chapter, which makes it interesting that they have a very Iron Warriors symbol for their chapter symbol. They have silver armour, much like Iron Warriors did. They have black pauldrons, much like Iron Warriors did. But they're not Iron Warriors. And yet, there is a loyalist chapter out there that could conceivably be painted to look like, well, a traitor legion. The same goes for lots of other stuff. In the wake of the Horus Heresy, all kinds of shenanigans went on in terms of trying to bring people who were still loyal to the Emperor back into the fold, giving them a place to call their own, and you can kind of get away with writing your own fluff to explain your army's appearance if you want to do something that is not strictly speaking the norm. The same thing doesn't just apply to Space Marines either. I mean, also the Primaris founding basically means that the Ultima founding, is where all the chapters of the Primaris were founded, so same thing. It's not just that, like, it's not just Space Marines that have that freedom, because there is now even more freedom than before with the Ultima founding and all the Primaris. You can pretty much get away with anything because so many loyalist chapters have been founded. There are so many successor chapters to the originals that you could pretty much paint them however you wanted, and you have got a lovely list of stuff that you could have them be related to. In addition to that, there's also the hints that maybe there's been a little bit of traitor gene seed used here and there that could quite easily explain why there is a Primaris chapter running around with distinctly word bearers-esque colouring going on, either original or post-heresy. And it's not just Space Marines either. I mean, in the case of things like Space Force and Grey Knights, there are certain expectations, but they can be broken. You can twist them. You can put your own slant on them if you want to. It's really not that much of a big deal, and to be honest, as long as the paint job's well done, most people won't be that fussed if you do turn up with a army that is not exactly how it would appear in the Codex. Similar questions are asked about things like Eldar as well. I mean, to be honest, Eldar are kind of confusing for a first-time player, I think, or someone who's just getting into the hobby, because the way that Aspect Warriors are presented on the Games Workshop site seems to suggest that they should all be painted differently. There's no unified front like there is with the Space Marine stuff, and the Primaris stuff for that matter. And to be honest, back in the day, it wasn't that uncommon to see Eldar armies where every different type of Aspect Warrior was painted different to the rest of the army. You just don't have to do that. If you want to have a nice unified paint scheme, if you paint a model and you go, that is exactly what I want, do the whole force like that. What it boils down to is not what you should do in terms of painting, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people need to learn before they get into the hobby, before they feel as though they're sealed in. It's not what you should do, it's what you want to do. If you see an Ultramarines army and you go, I love that colour, I love just the overall presentation of that, I would like a force of that of my very own, knock yourself out. If you look at a certain set of rules and go, oh, I'd really like those rules, but I don't know if I really want the army to look that way. It really doesn't matter. Like, it really does not matter. There are purists. There are people who will sit there and go, no, take that Eldar army away. You're using these craft world rules and it's clearly not from that craft world. Well, guess what? There was quite a few craft worlds. You could quite easily paint them however the hell you like and say, well, they came from this craft world which operated in terms of warfare very similarly to this one. It's the same thing with Tyranids as well. You don't just have to sit there and go, well, I want to use Hive Fleet Behemoth rules, therefore I must paint them like the Hive Fleet Behemoth. You just don't have to do that. You could easily have some sort of strain of Tyranid that in actual fact may have come from Hive Fleet Behemoth, but has since evolved and adapted into its own specific colour scheme. It's developed its own look. You should never be that worried, I think. When it comes to what should you do, how should you paint it, you should never be that concerned about what other people think. The trick is to make something that you're satisfied with, that you are happy with. I mean, for instance, my my Space Marine army, my Terminator Strike Force Ultra, my ridiculous 21 Terminator Force, has a completely non-uniform colour scheme. I mean, I've shown this guy I don't know how many times, but this is my Chapter Master, who you will probably not be able to see that well because the camera will refuse to focus. I told you it refused to focus. But you can kind of make out the basic colours. We've got a nice dark grey that's bordering on a little bit of blue. We've got bronze, we've got a bit of silver, and on some of the other models there's a bit of cream trim, and of course there is a bit of red for decoration. And every single Terminator has a sort of a dirty white helm. The thing is, I know that this army would, will, when we get around to playing again with them, probably drive one of my friends nuts. He likes symmetry, likes things to be uniform, to be matching. This Chapter Master has got one bronze leg, he's got one grey leg, and the torso is also grey. And yet, there are multiple Terminators in this force that have two bronze legs or two grey legs, or the bronze and the grey switched over. There are models in my force that have one half bronze, one half grey, that have one arm bronze, another one will have one leg and one arm bronze. And I wanted to do it that way because I wanted each model to have its own specific scheme within the overall scheme of the chapter. So the colours are uniform, but the pattern is not. You know, what one person might have, the other one could have the inverse of. One person could have one bronze arm, and then someone else on the other side could have entirely bronze armour, but for one grey arm. Admittedly, it doesn't sound great, but it looks good in practice, which at some point I need to actually get around to filming that video showing you that stupid force. There are people out there who would look at that and go, I don't like the way that's not symmetrical. I don't like the way that you've mixed certain parts. But at the end of the day, when I sit there and I look at that army, I'm satisfied with what I've built, and I'm satisfied with what I've painted. It's tabletop standard, and I like it, and that's the key bit. The answer, like the question shouldn't be, what should I paint my army? Because the answer to that is, you should paint it however you like. The real key to it is making sure that whatever decision you make in terms of painting your army, you are ultimately happy with, and you feel confident that you can actually carry that out. Because you could have some sort of crazy over-detailed paint scheme that no one would dare attempt. But if you can pull it off, well, that's the colour you should paint your army, no matter what army it is. That bit is almost irrelevant. The key thing is getting personal satisfaction out of it, and being able to basically take it out, put it on the tabletop and go, I've done all of that, and that is exactly how I wanted it. That's the most important bit. The colour scheme is not what makes the army. It's the enjoyment of painting it, and it's the satisfaction you get from completing it that makes the army good to look at. You could have a Grey Knight's force that is crimson. I mean, actually that would work quite well, because then you'd be able to say they were the Exorcist chapter. That's not a good example. You could have a Space Wolves force that is not grey. It doesn't have yellow shoulder pads or red and black squad markings. It could be black with purple. As long as the execution is good and you're happy with it, that's the most important bit. And if someone sits there and says, I'm not playing that because you haven't painted it properly, the chances are they probably weren't going to be that fun to play with in the first place, and you're probably better off finding someone else to play with instead. So, hopefully that's been at least a little bit helpful to those of you who are sitting there sort of going, I don't know what to do. Should I paint it this way? Should I not paint it that way? What is the correct answer to this? Correct answer is do whatever the hell you like. It's your army. You bought it, you paid for it, your money went into it, your time is going to go into it, and so the important thing is that you get out of it what you want to get out of it, not what someone else decides is correct, or not what someone else decides is the rules for that particular force. If you like the video, like the video. If you have any particularly interesting examples of off-the-wall colour schemes that work really well, if you've painted your army a completely non-standard scheme, but it's actually worked out exactly how you wanted, let me know in the comments below. I will try and make it so you can post links so we can see examples. I'll go through and, actually manually approve comments if they get flagged, so that people can actually see examples of stuff done in interesting or non-standard ways. In the meantime, feel free to click any of the stuff all over the screen. There's the Patreon thing, subscribe thing, videos, all of that crap. Click it if you want to, don't click if you don't want to. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.